Welcome to your deep dive on the language of love.
Ooh, I like that.
We're going to unpack some pretty fascinating insights from Gary Chapman's The 5 Love Languages series. We've got excerpts from his core book, The Secret to Love That Lasts, the edition specifically for men. And get this, even versions focusing on children and teenagers.
You know, what's really intriguing about Chapman's work is how it resonates with people from all walks of life. It's like he's cracked a code for understanding why we sometimes feel so loved, while other times, even with the best intentions, our efforts fall flat.
Exactly. And it's funny, right? We spend years learning French or Spanish, but this language of love, the one that truly makes us feel connected, we're just expected to be fluent.
Oh, yeah.
So our mission today is to explore these 5 love languages and see how they might be playing out in your life based on what you shared with us.
And just like you're more comfortable expressing yourself in English, each of us has a native love language that just clicks. But the trick is it's often different from the languages spoken by our loved ones.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Chapman lays out these 5 love languages: words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch.
Right.
At first glance, it seems pretty straightforward, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as we dig deeper, the nuances get really interesting.
It's not just about labeling actions. It's about understanding what those actions communicate to the other person. For example, you mentioned you love receiving thoughtful gifts. But what makes a gift truly meaningful for you? Is it the price tag, the practicality, or something else entirely?
That's such a good point. It's like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it's about decoding the message behind the action. And this makes me think about that anecdote from the 5 love languages about the man who was married 3 times and couldn't understand why love kept fizzling out.
Oh, yeah, this guy, 3 marriages in, you got to wonder what's going on. He's showering his 3rd wife with compliments, telling her she's beautiful, how much he loves her, how proud he is to be her husband. All lovely sentiments, but it's backfiring. Sounds a bit like what you're describing with your partner, no?
Yeah, actually. My partner often complains that I don't compliment them enough, but I show my love by doing things for them. Acts of service. Could this be a love language mismatch in action?
That's a very strong possibility. And this is where understanding the love languages can be a game changer. It's not enough to just be loving. We have to be intentional about speaking the language that resonates with our loved ones.
So it's not just about the action, it's about the meaning behind it. Like even within quality time, what's meaningful to me might bore my partner to tears. I love going to museums, but they'd rather be hiking in the woods.
You got it. And this is where Chapman's love tank analogy comes in. Every act of love spoken in the right language fills up that tank, making our partners feel secure and appreciated.
I get the love tank idea. But is it really that simple? Can't other factors impact a relationship? What about communication styles, individual personalities, even just having a bad day?
You raise an excellent point. The love languages aren't a magic bullet. They're a tool to understand one crucial aspect of a healthy relationship. It's like learning the grammar of a language. You still need vocabulary, cultural understanding, and so on.
So if we think of the love languages as this foundational element,
Yeah.
what happens when those tanks start running low? Does it always lead to conflict?
Not necessarily outright conflict, but it definitely creates a breeding ground for misunderstandings and resentment. Think about it. When you're feeling unloved, you're more likely to be irritable, critical, even withdraw emotionally.
It's like that saying, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
If you're running on an empty love tank, you might lash out in ways that have nothing to do with the actual issue.
Precisely. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Chapman argues that by speaking our partner's love language, we can not only avoid conflict, but actually foster a deeper sense of connection and intimacy.
Okay, I'm hooked. So how do we start deciphering these love languages both for ourselves and our loved ones?
Well, a good starting point is to pay close attention to how you express love naturally. What comes easily to you? Do you shower your loved ones with compliments? Are you always planning thoughtful surprises? Or maybe you feel most loving when you're tackling a project together.
That's so true. I do find myself constantly wanting to help out and do things for my partner. It's like my instinct is to make their life easier, to take care of them in that practical way.
That's a classic indicator of acts of service being one of your dominant love languages. And you mentioned that your partner often expresses a desire for more compliments. That's a strong clue that words of affirmation might be their top language.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we go beyond those initial clues and really understand the nuances of each love language? Like, I get that words of affirmation are about expressing appreciation verbally, but what does it actually look like in practice?
You're absolutely right. It's not just about saying I love you. It's about being specific, genuine, and understanding what kind of affirmation resonates most with the other person. For some, it's public acknowledgement. For others, it's those quiet, heartfelt whispers of appreciation.
So for someone who thrives on words of affirmation, a grand romantic gesture might not mean as much as a simple note left on the pillow saying, "I noticed you did the dishes. Thank you. It means a lot to me."
Spot on. It's those seemingly small gestures that speak volumes because they communicate genuine attention and appreciation. And it's not just romantic relationships. Remember that story about Caleb from the 5 love languages of children?
Oh, yeah. The little guy who was acting out at school, his parents were loving but totally missing the mark because his primary love language was quality time, and their busy schedules weren't allowing for that.
Right, and it wasn't about extravagant vacations. It was about those simple moments of focused attention. Reading a book together before bedtime, taking a walk after dinner, really being present with him even for just 15 minutes.
This Caleb kid, his issues sound a bit like what you mentioned about your nephew. Could that be a love language mismatch too?
It's definitely worth considering. You mentioned he's been withdrawn lately, even a bit sullen. Maybe his primary love language isn't being met, and that's manifesting as emotional distance. Have you noticed what kinds of things make him light up?
He's always been really responsive to physical affection, big hugs, roughhousing, even just sitting close while watching a movie. Could physical touch be his thing?
It's entirely possible, and it's a reminder that physical touch isn't just about romantic intimacy. It's about that primal need for connection, for feeling safe and loved through physical closeness.
But isn't gift-giving materialistic? How do we know it's genuine love and not just buying affection?
You raise an important point. It's not about the monetary value. It's about the thoughtfulness behind the gift. It's about the message it conveys. Like, remember how you mentioned your grandmother always knitted you scarves for your birthday, even when you were a teenager and thought they were uncool?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I saved every single one. It wasn't about the scarf itself. It was about knowing she'd spent hours creating something just for me. That's pure love right there.
Exactly. That's the essence of the receiving gifts language. It's about feeling seen, cherished, and remembered. It's about the effort and thoughtfulness that went into choosing something that reflects your unique personality and interests.
Okay, so we've got words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, physical touch. What about acts of service? Isn't that just about doing chores and running errands?
Well, it can certainly involve those things, but it's much more than that. It's about taking actions that genuinely ease your loved one's burden and make their life a bit smoother. It's about speaking love through those practical gestures of care and support.
So it's less about the task itself and more about the motivation behind it. Like, if I know my partner hates unloading the dishwasher, but I secretly love it, don't judge. Does that still count as an act of service?
That's a really interesting question, and it brings up the idea that sometimes a single action can actually speak multiple love languages simultaneously.
Whoa, multilingual love. Tell me more about that.
Let's say you plan a weekend getaway for your partner. On the surface, it seems like a gift, right? But if you also know that your partner desperately needs some quality time with you and has been craving a break from their busy schedule, that trip suddenly becomes a multi-layered expression of love.
Mind blown. So it's like those fancy French verbs that have multiple meanings depending on the context.
You got it. And that's why understanding these nuances is so important. It's not about rigidly adhering to 5 separate categories. It's about using this framework to decode the deeper meaning behind our actions and how they impact our loved ones.
So we're not just learning vocabulary words. We're learning to understand the grammar, the syntax, the poetry of love.
Oh, I love that.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to relationships. It's like we've been trying to solve a complex equation using only basic arithmetic.
It's a common mistake. We assume that love is this universal language that everyone experiences it and expresses it in the same way. But Chapman's work challenges that assumption, showing us that love is actually a dialect, unique to each individual.
And just like you wouldn't expect someone to understand you if you were speaking Swahili when they only speak Spanish, we can't expect our loved ones to feel truly loved if we're not speaking their love language.
That's the key right there. It's about recognizing that what fills our own love tank might leave our partner feeling empty and vice versa.
Okay, so let's say we've done our homework. We've identified our own love language and our partners. We're ready to start speaking fluent love. Are there any pitfalls we should be aware of? Like, can we overdo it with a particular love language, even if it's their primary one?
That's a fascinating question. And it highlights another layer of complexity. You see, even within a single love language, there are nuances and preferences. What feels loving to one person might feel suffocating or even manipulative to another.
So even if my partner's love language is physical touch, showering them with hugs and kisses 24/7 might not be the best approach.
Exactly. It's about being attuned to their specific needs and boundaries. Maybe they love holding hands while walking but feel smothered by constant cuddling. It's about finding that sweet spot where your expression of love aligns with their comfort level.
So like learning any language, it's not just about memorizing vocabulary. It's about understanding the cultural context, the subtle cues, the unspoken rules.
Well said. And this brings up another important point that Chapman emphasizes. Love is a choice, not just a feeling.
Wait, what do you mean by that? Isn't love supposed to be all about those warm, fuzzy feelings?
Feelings are important, of course, but they can be fleeting, influenced by external factors like stress, fatigue, even the weather. True love, the kind that sustains relationships through thick and thin, is a conscious decision we make to show up for our loved ones, even when it's hard, even when we don't feel like it.
So it's about choosing to speak their love language even when our own love tank is running on empty.
You got it. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is put our own needs aside and focus on meeting the needs of our loved ones. It's about acting from a place of love, even when our emotions are telling us to do otherwise.
Wow, that's a powerful perspective. It's like we're not just passively experiencing love, we're actively creating it through our choices and actions.
And that's where the real magic happens, because when we choose to love consciously and intentionally, we not only strengthen our relationships, but we also transform ourselves. We become more patient, more understanding, more empathetic.
It's like love is this muscle we can develop through practice, and the more we use it, the stronger it becomes.
That's a great analogy. And just like any muscle, it requires regular exercise. It's not about grand gestures or sporadic bursts of affection. It's about those small, consistent acts of love spoken in the right language that truly nourish a relationship.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of love languages, what's the key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
The most important thing to remember is that love is a language we can all learn to speak. It might feel foreign at first, but with practice and a genuine desire to connect, we can become fluent in the languages that make our loved ones feel truly seen, understood, and cherished.
It's about moving beyond those generic expressions of love and learning to personalize our approach, tailoring it to the unique needs of each individual.
And remember, it's not just about romantic relationships. These principles apply to all our relationships, our children, our friends, our families, even our colleagues.
So now that you've been introduced to this concept, I encourage you to take some time to reflect. What do you think your primary love language might be? And what about those closest to you? How can you use this knowledge to build stronger, more fulfilling connections?
And if you're hungry for more, we highly recommend diving into Gary Chapman's full The 5 Love Languages series. There's a treasure trove of wisdom waiting to be uncovered.
Until next time, keep speaking the language of love.